Diary of a CEO recently did an episode with Mo Gawdat about AI, and the thumbnail really caught my eye because it said that we shouldn't have children in an AI world. What Mo says in it actually has implications further than he recognizes, Stephen recognizes, who's the host of Diary of a CEO, and I think probably most of the viewers who watched it recognize. So first of all, let's see the clip.
You said if you have kids, if you don't have kids, maybe don't have kids right now.
I would definitely consider thinking about that, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd seriously consider not having kids
Wait a couple of years.
because of artificial intelligence?
No, it's bigger than artificial intelligence, Stephen. We all know that. I mean, there has never been such a perfect storm in the history of humanity. Economic, geopolitical, global warming, or climate change. You know, the whole idea of artificial intelligence and many more. This is a perfect storm. This is the depth of uncertainty. The depth of uncertainty. It's never been more, in a video gamer's term, it's never been more intense. This is it. Okay? And when you put all of that together, if you really love your kids, would you want to expose them to all of this? A couple of years. Why not?
So I think there are two things that we can touch on that Mo's spoken about here. So the first one is about risk and exposing your potential future child to risk. And the second one is something he says near the end, which is if you really love your child, then you wouldn't expose them to that. So let's take them one by one. So the first one, Mo is basically saying that at this specific point in time, we are approaching or in the eye of a perfect storm. And he cites things like artificial intelligence, climate change, economics, and there's probably a whole host of other things as well. So what he's saying here is we are at a uniquely risky point in time where to expose a potential future person to that, which literally didn't need to be exposed to any risk at all because they don't exist. So it's not like they were there wanting to come into existence and be exposed to this risk for some kind of benefit. He's saying because of this unique risk, we should not expose new people to that. But the observation I want to make, which I don't think Mo or Stephen or really many people watching would have realized, is why are we focusing on the specific risks of today with AI or climate change or economics? Because any child that Mo or anyone else is going to create is going to be exposed to risk. And I don't just mean risk from AI or climate change or economics or any of these sort of more grandiose things that we can think about and think those are major risks. And they tend to be, because they're quite grand and because we can fit them into this sort of wider meta-narrative, I think people recognize them as the risks they are more, which I think is why Mo is making this statement. But there are many other things in everyday life that everyone gets exposed to, which are massive risks. Just to name a few, you have cancer, genetic diseases, accidents, natural disasters, infectious diseases, crime, abuse, mental health, and the list goes on, right? If we were to list out all of the very real risks that we were putting someone at when we create them, AI, climate change, economics would just be a few of the things on the list. And so when Mo makes this sort of lukewarm antinatalist argument of we shouldn't be creating people into this specific set of risks, I actually think it has wider implications because everyone we create has risks that they are exposed to. And if we think about it, they may not be risks that are any better or worse. If we think about something very common, cancer is something awful to go through and many people die from it. If someone was to weigh up, would I rather get cancer or live in a world where there's artificial intelligence or climate change or some sort of economic disaster where there's a lot of uncertainty as to how my life will turn out? It's not clear to me that being in those situations and maybe being negatively impacted by them to some degree or another is worse than being in a world without any of those things, but being at the risk of cancer and any of the other things I listed off earlier. When it comes down to the individual you're creating, them getting cancer or them being negatively impacted by AI, it's not clear to me that this fixation that Mo has on AI or economics or climate change is really rational when we look at the backdrop of all of the risks that we expose individual people to when we create them, regardless of AI, climate change, economics, etc. So that's the first one. I think that Mo makes a specific risk argument for antinatalism, but I think it has has wider implications that people aren't recognizing. So the second thing is when Mo says, if you really love your kids, would you want to expose them to all of this? Now, obviously, to get out of the way first, when someone says love your kids and talking about kids who don't exist at this point in time but could exist in the future, obviously we're talking about love the idea of your kids or your kids in abstract thought. And I think this is a very reasonable way of thinking about things. If you really love someone, even if they don't exist, why would you create them and expose them to things that you know are awful and horrible? And again, like I said in the previous part, that doesn't just apply to AI and climate change and economics. We know that without any of those things, the world has all sorts of horrible things in it. And we see children and other people fall foul of these things all the time, and it's horrible to see. And so it seems clear to me that if you do love your kids or your potential future kids, why create them in the first place and expose them to all of these things? Whilst I have no doubt that people who do create other people love those people, it seems like an odd form of love to create them only so that you can further your own interests because you have an interest in creating them. They didn't have an interest in coming into existence. So you create them to further your own interests, and by doing so, put them at the risk of all the things we talked about before, but also the guarantee of suffering and death. And you do this all without being able to gain any sort of input from them. And so imposing a significant amount of suffering on someone and guaranteed death and the risk of even greater suffering on someone so that you can further your own interests and say that you did it because you love them seems to me like an odd form of love. It seems to me like if you actually did love the idea of your children, you simply wouldn't create them in the first place, actually foregoing your interest of wanting to create them. And I think foregoing your interests for someone else, obviously they don't exist at this point of time, but in the abstract, that seems to me like a greater form of love. But again, I do want to state that I recognize that the people who do create other people and have kids, they will love those kids in a very deep way. What I just want to point out is another perspective on this, which I hope will make people think. So those are the two things I thought were worth mentioning and adding into the thing that Mo said in that episode of Diary of a CEO. I thought it was a very interesting episode just in the whole, so I do recommend people go watch it. I'll put a link in the description. But let me know what you thought of what Mo said and my two things that I said about what Mo said in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.